I'm no one for ceremony. And in fact, that's exactly what Patrick Henry said at the beginning of his famous speech. This is no time for ceremony. And I'll say the same thing. This really is not any time for ceremony. And if we withhold our opinions through fear of giving offense or not fitting in or not being politically correct, then what did Patrick Henry say? We are guilty of treason. We need to speak forth the truth and let the consequences fall where it might. And so that's what we'll get to today. I will speak the truth, and we're going to have a great time doing it. It still should be fun to learn about these things and to get together defending freedom and liberty. Also, I don't know, I think most of you have heard, and we'll just be really upfront with this. I had a heart attack 7 weeks ago. This Monday will be 8 weeks. And it was life-threatening. It was a matter of life and death. Obviously, heart attacks are, but this was what the doctor referred to as the widowmaker. Those of you who have ever heard that term before know that that's 100% blockage of the main artery into the heart, and that's what it was. And I am doing better. This is my first out-of-town event since the heart attack. My wife and some friends told me not to go to this, but I felt fine. I felt like it was okay to do. Am I back to normal? Not even close. No, I'm not back to normal. I don't have the stamina that I had before the heart attack. There was really no warning. The day of the heart attack, I went and got a haircut and went and bought new tennis shoes to go work out. I felt like working out. I went to work out, and bam, I'm on the treadmill for just walking, warming up for 5 minutes, and it hit. And let me tell you, there's no question what it is. There's no question. It's not indigestion, and it's not heartburn. If anybody thinks that pain is heartburn, they're crazy. It's not. I mean, and it was right there in the middle, and it was horrible. I drove myself to the hospital, which you're not supposed to do, but you know what? I spent 20 years in law enforcement waiting on ambulances, and I was going to be damned if I was going to wait that day for an ambulance. You know, I remember even as a patrol officer, I would argue with the ambulance drivers and paramedics. You got to get this guy out of here. You know, this guy needs to get to the hospital. Officer Mack, we got this covered. Just leave us alone. We know what we're doing. And so I'm just sitting there really frustrated with these guys because they don't get this little girl who just drowned it or other people to the hospital. And so I knew where I was, and I called my son and I said, hey, I'm having a heart attack. He's a nurse. And I said, I'm driving myself. If I start feeling faint, I'm going to stop right in the middle of the road, and that'll be that. But I got there in less than 5 minutes to the hospital, pulled right in front of the emergency room door, ran in and said, I'm having a heart attack. They hooked me up to a machine. In 3 minutes, they said, yes, he's having a heart attack. I said, I told you. And then within a half hour, I had a stent that opened up the whole thing, and it looked like the difference of they showed me the difference of the pictures of the heart. It looked like Niagara Falls afterwards. I mean, just complete flow. The first time, only about a third of the heart was getting any blood at all. And I'm lucky to be here, and the doctor kept saying that over and over. So I will tell you what a lot of speakers say. I will tell you that this has new meaning to me, and it's, excuse the pun, it's from the heart. I'm really grateful to be here.
We're glad to be here.
So we're going to get into this, and there's a lot of things that we could spend 4 hours together, no problem. It'd be real easy. You'd be entertained the whole time. You'd love it. But the main thing is we want to get into the solution and where all this came from. Well, this all came from a small town sheriff in southeastern Arizona who was so naive to think that he could sue the federal government. And we're talking about the Clinton administration. You want to sue the Clintons? And you think nothing's going to happen to you? You know? And so it was a real miracle that this happened. I'll tell you the real miracle was because I live with a pretty little blonde girl, my wife, and we're going to be married 40 years this coming May. And she really made the decision to file the suit. I wanted to do it, and I was convinced I was going to do it, and I felt impressed that I was supposed to do it. But I hadn't run it by her yet. And I really relaxed, and I thought, oh, good. I won't have to do it. She's going to talk me out of it. She'll do the wife thing. Are you nuts? You know? And, but she didn't. And she actually said something that I'll never forget. And her recollection of that day does not exactly coincide with mine. But this one does. Because she said, now we know why you were supposed to be sheriff. And my mom said the same thing the next day. Now we know why you were supposed to be sheriff. Because it was a real miracle that I was sheriff. I moved home from Utah where I'd been a cop, and I hadn't even lived in my hometown for 12 years, and I walk in and say, make me your head law enforcement officer, make me your sheriff. And, you know, some didn't know me at all, but, you know, my dad had lived there all his life, and he had been an FBI agent there for 25 years. And so we did it, and we actually filed, and I never thought it would go anywhere. You know, you always hear people, well, I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to take you all the way to the United States Supreme Court. You know what the chance of that is? You actually getting heard by the Supreme Court? Having them even let it cross their desk is a miracle. Having them accept it, and they call it granting certiorari. They have to talk Latin about everything. I don't know. Granting certiorari means they'll take the case. And how that came about, just absolutely miraculous. And if 6 other sheriffs hadn't joined the lawsuit, especially the ones from Texas and Louisiana, it probably would have never made it. Even though we won, Prince and I from Montana and Arizona, myself from Arizona, we won at the district court, but we lost at the circuit, and it probably would have died right there. But Romero from Louisiana and Coog from Texas went to the 5th Circuit in Louisiana, and they got the opposite ruling that we got from the 9th Circuit in San Francisco. And so we have opposite rulings in circuit courts on the same damn case. And so that guaranteed a trip to the Supreme Court. And this little booklet, and you can get these out at my table, and if you can't afford it, you can have one for free, but they're $1, or if you buy any of my books off the table, you get this free. And there's a lot of tools there, and this is my latest book, and it's really what this is a tool for freedom. This is a tool for liberty. And the book title is Are You a David? And you want to ask that question to every public official. And I take it right, I try to disarm women at the very beginning from being offended by the title, so I have a woman sheriff from Texas on the cover. This is Sheriff Pamela Elliott. And I was going to be on the cover. It's my book. I can be on the cover if I want. But I fired me. It's very rare that you fire yourself. But I fired me, hired her, and she did it for free. But I wanted a female sheriff, and she's been to some of our CSPOA conventions, and she's just dynamite. She's a former Marine and a real stalwart constitutional sheriff from Edwards County, Texas. And are you a David? She proudly says, yes, I am. And there's just too few of these David sheriffs in the country, and we've got to have more. But I'm going to show you the evidence that it's happening, that it's true, it's real. And what if we have hundreds of sheriffs in this country keeping their oath, enforcing the Constitution, and enforcing the 10th Amendment? In fact, that's a legal question. I'll ask all of you constitutional scholars right now. Who's supposed to enforce the 10th Amendment? Who's supposed to enforce state sovereignty? Of course, it's the states. You really think that the 10th Amendment was for Congress to enforce? They're the ones destroying it. Oh, I know. You're waiting for Barack Obama to enforce the 10th Amendment. Mm-hmm. Probably not going to happen. The 10th Amendment, it says these powers are retained by the states or the people. So if we retain them, then we must enforce them, or we're not retaining them. And certainly the federal government is not going to say, Oh, well, that's something the states are going to have to do. We can't do that, you know. They don't care. They will grab all the power they want to, and they know the states don't have to go along, so how do they get the states to go along? Bribe them! Absolutely. They don't call it bribe, but they call it federal grants. Let me see if I got this right. So they'll come in and tax us, and then we send all this money to Washington, and they build these buildings and hire all these people with that money so that they can administer these grants back to where it came from in the first place. Why don't we just keep the money and not build the buildings and hire all those idiots and more bureaucrats? I'm just asking, you know, it's such, the way we do things in Washington, that's just another example of how stupid and far off we are from the path the Founding Fathers established. So we are going, and I'm going to, am I going to need to take this if I walk around?
Yeah, because otherwise...
Don't say Mick Jagger, say my good friend Ted Nugent. That Nuge, Uncle Nuge, yeah, Uncle Ted. All right. So, you know, I really like to start this whole thing with the left side, because everybody believes this on the left. They believe this. We just celebrated, what, Selma and all that. And in fact, Mr. and Mrs. Obama are celebrating it today, as a matter of fact, and what happened in Selma. But Martin Luther King said something I totally agree with. He's absolutely correct. There are two types of laws, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. And I'll be the first to say the same thing, and I'll be the first to say the same thing he's saying here. But one has not only a legal, but a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Okay? Disobey. Now, who gets to decide that? Okay, sometimes. But if you have the sheriff next to you when you do that, imagine how powerful that's going to be. The Oath Keepers is now a national, international organization that talks about the oath of office. I started talking about, in my first book, I have a chapter back in 1994 written to all law enforcement how we should be keeping our oath of office. And then I hear of Oath Keepers and I had a V8 moment. Why didn't I think of that organization myself? Which in maybe some ways I did, but didn't start one, and Stuart Rhodes had the leadership and insight to do that. Fantastic idea. If you take an oath, can you abdicate the responsibility of its fulfillment to somebody else? The judge made me do it. The legislature don't cops say that all the time? I don't make the laws, I just have to enforce them. As if there's some moral high ground to that. I won't keep my oath, but I have the moral high ground in enforcing stupid laws that I took an oath to stand against. And what am I talking specifically there? Second Amendment.
Well, what really is really annoying about that is the fact that the cops will say, well, we don't make the laws, you got to change it in the legislature.
Right.
But when you go to the legislature, there they are lobbying
but why
the
mess with that?
to not change the law.
Why mess with that at all when I take the oath and there's three branches of government, all three took the same oath to preserve the Constitution, and so I tell judges and legislatures to go hang it. I'm not going to be your little puppet. And we have actually had some sheriffs do that. Some recently. And if we have hundreds of sheriffs and public officials, we want county commissioners on this too. We want chiefs of police on this too. We have some chiefs of police that are Oath Keepers and are on our board and members of Oath Keepers and members of CSPOA. Did I tell you all of you can join CSPOA? Okay, good. Just want to make sure you know that. Okay, this is the oath of office. All of us swear this, and again, is there any way I can say, well, my sergeant is the one that I have to obey? I don't see anything in here that says I will obey my sergeant or my lieutenant or the chief or sheriff. This says I solemnly swear. I have to decide. I have to say what's morally out of line with not keeping my oath. I have to decide that confiscating her gun is something I will not do, even if my sergeant tells me to, or even if the governor and the legislature tell me to. I have to side with the supreme law of the land, and that is my oath. So, yeah. And this is Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution that requires us to take the oath. You cannot take your job until you swear the oath. Make sense? You would think. Now, the Founding Fathers required that. But another thing, look at the first two words, state nullification. Of course, all of you know that I made that up, and I'm the one that started the whole state nullification. What are you laughing about? He's laughing at me. He doesn't believe I did that. Well, he's right. You should have all been laughing because I did not create this. I kind of did it, maybe accidentally and naively, but I still did it. But when I was sheriff, all of you heard, or most of you have heard, I sued the federal government. Did you hear about, well, no. But did you hear about the bridge? You didn't hear about the bridge, did you? Didn't get much press. We had a bridge washout. And the Army Corps of Engineers came in to, of course, take care of the bridge problem and the repair and blah, blah, blah. Well, the people who lived on the north side of the bridge needed to take their kids to school on the south side, only about a mile away. If the bridge isn't working, it's a 26-mile round trip. And so those people got sick and tired of the county commissioners not fixing the bridge. They didn't go complain to the Army Corps of Engineers. They complained to the county. I wasn't even involved in the situation. I'm not maintenance. I'm not on the commission, the county commission. I don't have anything to do with that. You know, so they're going along and they're going along, and still about a year later, the bridge isn't fixed. Why? Because the environmental impact studies haven't been completed yet. We just want to put it back the way it was, okay? Look at the pictures of the bridge, okay? And so the board finally is sick and tired of the complaints from the citizens on the north side of the bridge, and it's only probably, you know, maybe 30 different families, maybe not even that, but they're sick and tired of dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers. So they vote unanimously, 3 of them vote unanimously to fix the bridge. They're going to fix the bridge. Ooh, now you got Papa Bear really mad. And the Army Corps of Engineers come in and they threaten to arrest all 3 Board of Supervisors, the county commissioners. They're going to arrest all 3 of them, and they're going to arrest all the maintenance workers, and they're going to charge the county $50,000 a day, ladies and gentlemen, for every day they're in violation. How do you do that? Why not make it $1 million a day? Why are they so stupid? Take $1 million a day like the EPA does, you know? So anyway, long story short, now I'm involved. They're threatening to arrest people in my county, and they don't even come in my office and say, hey, can you guys come help us arrest all these Board of Supervisors? Which normally I would like to do, you know? But for some strange reason, I'm on their side now. And so I told the Army Corps of Engineers, I said, hey, I really try to get along with everybody, but you might know this. I'm right now suing the Clinton administration. Maybe you don't know, maybe you do, but I'm not bluffing. If you try to arrest anybody, I'm going to arrest you. You're not going to arrest them. You're not going to arrest the maintenance workers. And so they leave. We fix the bridge. We don't pay a dime in fines. Nobody goes to jail. Everybody goes home, including the Army Corps of Engineers. Then, fast forward to 3 years ago, I'm at a funeral in Tucson for Jose Garena that the Oath Keepers and I were supporting because he was killed by the local SWAT team there. And after the memorial service, a man comes up to me and he hands me a card. He goes, you don't remember me, do you? And I go, no, who are you? He goes, I was one of those Army Corps of Engineer guys you called into your office that day. And I said, wow. He goes, I never got to tell you this, Sheriff, but I really admired you for what you did that day. It took a lot of cojones. And I said, well, I'm glad we didn't have to arrest anybody. Yeah, real quick.
This was a murdered or killed?
Well, his wife got $3.4 million in a settlement.
Because you really should say murdered rather than
Yeah.
killed.
Well, it could have been accidental, but yeah, he was murdered. Yeah, I mean, negligent homicide. This was like the FBI when they said they didn't kill Vicki Weaver. They said, we admit no fault, but here's $3.2 million. Randy Weaver's daughters got $3.2 million. This family got $3.4. So I guess that 3 point something is the going rate for accidentally, negligently killing somebody. And I was really fighting with the sheriff on the news. The media were having me and their sheriff going back and forth. And I said, hey, bottom line is, in about a year and a half, Mrs. Garena is going to be very wealthy. And if I'm wrong, come back and talk to me then. So, of course, nobody said anything when the $3.4 million was paid, you know. But,
to use euphemisms.
oh, yeah, you're right. So, state nullification is something that Jefferson and Madison, two of the most prominent constitutional scholars in history, said that this is what is important about defending liberty. And he said, states have the authority to judge the constitutionality of the federal government's laws and decrees. And they even go on in these decrees and say in the state resolutions of Kentucky and Virginia that we must interpose. And I love that word, interpose. Interpose is what we as oath keepers really do. You must interpose. Everybody knows what interpose means? It means put yourself in the way. Okay? Put yourself in the way. If a bad guy is here and the pretty little blonde girl or possible victim is here, the sheriff stands here. And he puts himself in the way. Doesn't have to be violent. Doesn't have to do anything. Doesn't have to arrest anybody. You just, if they move, you move. It's like basketball. You know, get in your defensive position, you know, and move your feet. You've got to do something. If the IRS comes to take the property, you put yourself in the way. And the first thing we want is for every public official, every sheriff especially, and we want, there's about 3,100 sheriffs in America, we want about 800 sheriffs doing this. Put the federal government on notice, especially the IRS, that there will be no more random audits. There will be no more confiscation of property. There will be no more lack of due process or probable cause. And you will not do anything in my county unless you check with me first. What's that called? Check and balance. Interpose. And it's proper and professionalism to put them on notice. Let them know what you expect and that what you will demand. And have we had this happen in other places in the country? Anybody ever hear of Sheriff Brad Rogers in Elkhart County, Indiana? The FDA comes in and does spot inspections, no probable cause, no due process, on David Hostetler, an Amish farmer, because you can't let these kind of criminals go. You let one Amish farmer not pasteurize his milk, and it's going to go all across the country, and pretty soon you have wholesome, clean, good dairy products going to everybody. No way. No. So, it's kind of funny. I've gone around the country drinking raw milk with some of these Amish farmers and other farmers and families that deal in raw milk. And we do it publicly. And the first one I did was in Wisconsin, in Madison, at the state capitol. We're drinking illegal milk. I felt like a drug user. Don't arrest me. Actually, we were kind of challenging them to arrest me. And I go all over the country now drinking raw milk. And the funny thing of it is, I hate milk. But it was kind of freedom milk.
I have a question on state nullification, because I get this argument from the statists and the leftists all the time.
Yeah.
When John C. Calhoun tried to use state nullification against the federal government back when they passed some sort of an excise tax that really affected South Carolina at the time, Madison came out against him. And I don't understand why.
When the federal government, you'll even see this in the Constitution. I was reading it yesterday on the plane, and I'm sorry I don't have the specific reference. But when it comes to true freedom issues, for instance, segregation. Well, I'm against segregation. If the governments can do that, I don't care if state, local, or whatever. No, Alabama did not have the right to enforce segregation. That violates the premise of our entire government, that we're all created equal. And then the U.S. Supreme Court even came out with what? Separate but equal. And that was a U.S. Supreme Court decision. So the only time I've ever seen it where it really mattered and I supported it was when the federal government came in to end segregation. And I believe, I think it was in Article 1, Section 8, I can't remember, but I was reading it, and I should have marked it right then, but I didn't, and I apologize. But it is in there. To exercise the authority in defense of liberty. Isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing? And if the federal government does that, more power to them. It's just that they hardly ever do it, and they're hardly ever correct. But yes, and that probably wasn't a true liberty issue, but segregation definitely was. Now, I'm going to have to get going here because we got about 25 minutes. He also argued that states should refuse to enforce laws which they deemed unconstitutional. And here's the word, interpose. Look at this. That the state's legislature, and it's not just their legislature, it's all executive, judicial, and legislative officers are duty-bound, it says. Duty-bound to interpose its power to prevent the federal government. These are the founding fathers talking about this way back in the late 1700s. We're talking about 1780 here. They know what government's going to do. They were scared to death of a central government. They were trying to keep a constitution that would keep them impotent. And then they came up with the Bill of Rights to even increase that impotency and to keep government small and powerless and out of our lives. And they were afraid this was going to happen, and they said the 10th Amendment's the best check and balance system we got. And so what do? We create a bribery system. Legalized bribery. There's no such thing as legalized bribery. It's against the law what they're doing. And so in my book, I'm trying to explain that to sheriffs. Well, first, don't ask for the money. And second, the states need to quit sending the money to Washington, D.C. Those are the two steps to end that problem, okay? So we interpose our power to prevent what? And the same back to the question about the federal government coming in. If the federal government interposes to protect God-given rights, more power to them, okay?
Did the Virginia legislature pass that resolution?
Virginia
Says he wrote it.
Yeah, they wrote, and quite honestly, I do not believe they became law. No.
Because that's what the statists will say. Well,
Right.
see, it didn't pass,
Well,
so it
it's-
means nothing.
Yeah, but it didn't change anything. It's still them talking about a true principle. And if you look at the principle behind the Bill of Rights, what did the Founding Fathers want with the Bill of Rights? To make a declaration of rights that the federal government could never violate. And I call the Bill of Rights the untouchables. These are the principles of liberty and freedom that government can never touch. Okay? So the 10th Amendment is the way to keep them from touching them. And if we don't have local officials enforcing state sovereignty in the 10th Amendment, then American liberty will die. It is the only solution we have left. It is the only peaceful solution we have left. If you don't have the enforcement of the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty in every state and every county, we will lose federalism. We will lose freedom. And we will continue to go down this cesspool toilet flushing of Washington, D.C. corruption and politics. It is the only chance we have left, and I would not bet that we have very much time to do it in. We have all got to get busy on this, okay? Now, these are the two sheriffs that went to the Supreme Court, Mack and Prince. Okay, look at this. This is an amazing principle. Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the law, subjecting himself to possible sanctions. This Brady bill that I sued over was the first time in American history that the federal government made a law telling and requiring sheriffs to participate in a federal gun control scheme, and if we failed to comply, we were subject to federal arrest. There was no money this time, no bribes this time. And I wouldn't have gone along if there had been bribes. Many people, oh, well, Sheriff Mack sued because there was no funding. No, I sued because they can't tell me what to do, and this was gun control, and I took an oath that I would never do gun control, okay? They could pay me $1 million a day, I'm still not gonna do it. Come on. So this is Judge Roll in the first decision on this entire ruling. Later, 4 years ago, in January of 2011, he was killed at the Safeway parking lot when Congresswoman Giffords was shot. There were 6 people killed. He was second. He was there that day. Why he was there? Well, there's 4 different stories about that. One of the greatest judges in the history of America killed that day. Now, you'll see Cleo, Chief Law Enforcement Officers, where that acronym is, they call the sheriffs the Cleos. Don't you love it when the federal government finally gets something right? This is actually the wording in the Brady bill. The plaintiffs in this case were called Cleos by the federal government. So if you ever want to show your sheriff who the Cleo is, just tell him to refer to the Brady bill. The federal government calls us the Cleos. And this is the threat of arrest. I just want you to know that I don't make these things up. Under a separate provision of the Gun Control Act, any person who knowingly violates the section of the Gun Control Act amended by the Brady bill shall be fined under this title, imprisoned for no more than 1 year, or both. So I was looking at a year in jail or a fine, $10,000 fine, or both, for not complying with a federal mandate. And Judge Roll was incensed by that threat, and he gave us an extremely powerful ruling. Okay. Now, Ronald Reagan decried the federal tax system, and that's what the quote was earlier. That was what that was, saying it was a huge injustice and it was un-American. This is Jennifer Long saying the same thing. Do you know who Jennifer Long was? She was an IRS agent, blowing the whistle that the IRS routinely fabricated evidence against American citizens. So my question now is, why would any sheriff allow the IRS in his county? They have a long, huge list of criminal activity throughout the past 50, 60 years. Presidents, including FDR, Nixon, and on and on and on, all used the IRS as political hitmen against their enemies. Now we have this recent scandal. Did you see the Republicans on national TV? Shaking their finger at the IRS agents and shaking their finger at Lois Lerner and yelling at them sometimes. Republicans yelling. And then Greta asked one of them that was doing it the most, I think it was Gowdy. And she said, man, look at what you said there. He's going, yeah, I gave it to him. And she goes, what are you going to do about it? And he goes, well, I'm going to do that again. And since then, the IRS has done worse things and has taken on more power and confiscating bank accounts because people use cash. And so that has happened. And they go in and destroy businesses and families with impunity, and nobody does anything about it. And nobody did anything about this Tea Party. If you have Constitution in your name, then we're going to go after you. No one did anything about it. In fact, a lady was bawling her head off testifying that even the FBI came out after her because the IRS got their buddies to come and help. The IRS isn't the only one having all the fun. FBI gets to join in too anytime they want. And so they keep harassing and harassing and harassing people. And we have thousands of victims of the IRS and their crimes. And I have to ask again, sheriff, chief, anybody in your county, How could you possibly allow these crooks to come into your county unfettered and unchecked by you, who has sworn to uphold and defend and protect and preserve the U.S. Constitution and to keep your people safe? And then that sheriff will go, I always tell them where to get a good lawyer. Come on. You do that, do you? And so now they spend the next 10, 15, 20 years in court, lose everything they've ever had, or you could stop it in a matter of minutes. Now, which one should we be doing? Interpose courageously. Are you a David? It's about time we had some. Now, here's the answer, and in that little book I showed you earlier, it's right in there. This is from the Supreme Court. This is the United States Supreme Court decision, Mack, Prince versus U.S., okay? It's in there. This is the solution, and he even tells us it's a step-by-step solution. Residual state sovereignty was also implicit, of course, in the Constitution's conferral upon Congress of not all governmental powers. What? Congress doesn't have all governmental powers? Well, if they don't have all, what kind do they have? Read on. But only discrete, enumerated ones. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to destroy Washington, D.C.? They don't have just discrete, enumerated powers. They can do anything they damn well please anytime they want to do it. Yes, because we have allowed it. And then he gives the solution again. Okay, what's the solution? Which implication? How do we keep them within their discrete, enumerated powers? This was all rendered express by the assertion of the 10th Amendment. And we said earlier, who's going to enforce the 10th Amendment? We have to do it. And in your county, the head law enforcement officer is the sheriff. The top executive is the sheriff. The only elected law enforcement officer in your county. He reports directly to you. And he must hear from you. And if he doesn't, he's probably just going to keep doing the same things he's always done. And that's where your assignment comes in. You need a relationship with your sheriff.
Hi, Sheriff, if you don't need me anymore right now, I'm going to go run.
Yeah, all right, I'll see you out there. Perfect. So folks, we have a Supreme Court decision that talks about the solution, that addresses the whole thing, and that this whole thing of keeping them within their discrete, enumerated powers and making sure this is rendered express is by the 10th Amendment. So he says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. So we have the solution. We have a Supreme Court decision. How come you never heard about it? Well, that's the reason you came to this conference. Now you do. And you should get lots of these and share them with your local public officials. And show them, you know what? The only way we keep the federal government out of here is if we enforce the 10th Amendment. And you know what? We're here to back you. We're here to be in your posse. We're here to volunteer with you any way you need us, Sheriff. Train us, help us. We'll do whatever you say. Absolutely, yes. And be armed when you do it. The great innovation of this design was our citizens would have two political capacities, one state and one federal. Get the next line. Each protected from incursion by the other. It's our assignment. We have to protect each other from these incursions. And if we don't, we're not doing our job. As Madison expressed it, the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. Well, we thought the federal government was supreme. Does the Supremacy Clause grant supremacy to the federal government? Yeah, if they follow the Constitution. If they don't, they have no supremacy, and they have no supremacy because they haven't followed the Constitution in decades. So they have none. Now, okay, the bottom line, look at that. He reinforces the solution. Read here in gold. A healthy balance of power between the states and the federal government will reduce the risk of tyranny and abuse from either front. Do we have that healthy balance of power today? Then the solution is governors and state legislatures and sheriffs and county commissions and school boards and city councils have got to get busy and get that balance back. And the first thing you should do is stop sending money to Washington. Okay?
How do they do that, though?
Pass a law. Okay? But most of these right now, we're meeting some of these, and we have about 35 states that have already passed some sort of nullification laws. You pass a nullification of sending money to Washington, ha ha ha. Now that will be a nullification law that'll have some teeth, okay? Hence, we do this. Why? Why do we do this? Founder said it. Scalia quotes Madison from the Federalist Papers, and this is one. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other at the same time that each will be controlled by itself. Any question as to whether or not the federal government will control itself? That's what I thought. That is a joke. People always laugh every time I say that. All right. The federal government, we held, may not compel the states to enact or administer a federal regulatory program. That actually comes from New York versus U.S. That happened a couple of years before mine, and they just quoted that from that one. Yeah.
Regulatory program is constitutional?
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, so Obamacare, even though, quote, Roberts said it was constitutional, Roberts broke about 5 different laws doing what he did. But the only thing he could lawfully do was refer it back to Congress and say, it would be constitutional if you make it a tax. But Roberts cannot make a law a tax that was not a tax. He cannot do that, and that's what he actually did, or he tried to do. It's completely illegal, unlawful, okay? The only thing lawfully, he could refer it back to Congress, and then it would have never passed. But the Constitution, imagine a Supreme Court decision that says something so crazy and outrageous as this, but the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. Well, what does that do to the welfare state? What does that do to Obamacare? And just so you know, the reason we were passing some of this around is because I don't have insurance. And you can imagine my hospital bills after the heart attack. And my wife was in the hospital in November for MRSA. So she had about a $35,000 bill, and now mine is almost $100,000. And so some people started a GoFundMe account, and you have got to look at that. It's quite amusing. And we'd love you to make a $5 donation, and that allows you to make a comment on that. Because you want to know the truth? We now have more liberals donating than conservatives. I have people who dislike me donating more than people who like me. Because you can't keep a liberal from shutting up. You can't keep them, even if they have to make a donation to me to do it, they're good. It's like this whole site was made. Tell Sheriff Mack where to go and where to get off, and you only have to give $5 to do it. And so they're doing it. And I'm not kidding you. We have got hate mail, death threats, all because I don't have Obamacare. I know. So if you want to get involved with that, we'd really love you to. Of course, the donation goes to a great place, my medical bills, and helping us that way. But the follow-up treatment for my cardio rehab and the medicines, and I'm actually going to, most of you will like this, I'm going to a cardiologist who's also a naturopath. And I love what he's doing. I really like him. And he's kind of liberal. So I've already given him a couple of my books. We've had a couple of conversations on that. But he's really helping. And I'm taking good herbal supplements and whatnot. And I even had another doctor call me from Texas, and he said, you need to be taking hawthorn root or hawthorn berries, whatever, extract, and then cayenne. And I said, that's kind of coincidental. Yesterday, my doctor just gave me those two. And that's some of the thing I'm taking, but it's about $600 a month just for my meds and that stuff. So, okay. And so is that 5 minutes I got left? Okay, perfect. Now, that's the decision. This is the actual decision you're seeing now, and I got to show you a couple other things. Badge versus the badge. Now, I didn't make this up either. This is from Range Magazine way back in 2003. And I want to show you why Range Magazine did an article about badge versus badge. Because Sheriff Gary Amon from Idaho said he didn't want BLM. Remember the Bundy situation? The same thing happened here in Idaho in 2003. And Sheriff Gary Amon got involved. And he said he warned that he expected to be notified of any federal investigation or enforcement action, including impoundment of trespassing cattle. The feds considered to be trespassing on U.S. property. Exactly what happened at the Bundy Ranch. Okay? A sheriff got involved, and it all ends peacefully and on the side of the rancher. So, a sheriff from California did the same thing. Even took a stronger stand. This guy isn't sheriff anymore. San Bernardino Sheriff revoked local law enforcement authority from the federal government across all 20,000 square miles of his county. It's one of the biggest counties in America, by the way. And advised them to consult him first before taking any action on private property. Folks, what does that do for you? It's called interposing. It's called standing for freedom. It's called check and balance. It's called doing your job. It's called keeping your oath. And Sheriff Jones did it in Nevada the same time, same year. And all of this is documented in Range Magazine. And all of it is even easier to read in Are You a David? And there's lots of other examples in here about sheriffs who are standing and doing the right thing. Amazing. The miracle has started. What is this? This is evidence that it's working. This is evidence that we've got to make this bigger, better, and faster. To the millionaire who may have snuck in here, and you're hiding and you're trying to dress down, if we were funded, there'd be no stopping this. Do you want us to keep going with this? My wife and I spend full time on this. Membership for you would be $35. If you're retired law enforcement or military or government, it's $25 for a year, less than $3 a month. If you can give more, do it. I'm only going to ask you this. Do what you can. I don't want you to sell your home. I don't want you to go bankrupt. I want you to do what you can. Okay? We're not funded. We go month to month trying to make ends meet and keep this thing rolling. I sell books and I travel, and seriously, my wife and I spend 12 to 15 hours a day on this. Except Sunday. Sunday's only probably about 6 to 8 hours. Every day. Even when we're on vacation. This is the thing. You've got to get involved and you've got to focus on solutions. And there's very few out there. I'm going to tell you right now. If you join all the solution groups, you'll be in about 3 or 4 groups. CSPOA, Oath Keepers, the Free State Project, I like that. But we now have a group doing that in Arizona, Free County Project, Constitutional County Project. That's a website, constitutionalcountyproject.org, okay? And they've asked me to run for sheriff. I said yes before the heart attack. I'm saying maybe now, because I just don't know, starting a campaign in about 6 months, if my wife and I could handle it. My wife's health isn't good. Mine took a turn for the worse. Can I get back to full recovery and just like I was before? Absolutely. But I just don't know right now. I don't know. But it is the solution. We've got to, and I like New Hampshire's thing, move to New Hampshire. We've got to live in the same place. What if we started in a county? It's called Navajo County in Arizona. What if we started there and we make a Constitution county? And there's a sheriff, maybe me, maybe another, that says to the feds, you're not going to do that stuff in my county anymore. My dear friends, I've shown you the evidence. You can take the books and the evidence and tools with you. I'll be out at the table. You can pick them up there. Make sure you get Are You a David in this booklet. Now, if you get Are You a David, you get this free. But get more of these. You should be passing these out, passing them forward. And a real quick question.
Comment?
Pardon me, yes?
It's comment. I'm Larry Borland. I actually have a great sheriff, Jonathan Hill, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
He's a member of your group.
He is.
We're all here. We all understand and even know what the 10th Amendment is. And I'm also school board president there. If you go to the current textbooks that are Common Core from Pearson, and I have read them page for page, even when they get to the section of the Bill of Rights, there's just one that doesn't have anything. It doesn't even exist in the textbook.
It goes 1, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes? Yeah, well, guess which ones? 2 and 10. They don't even bother to say something that's a misinterpretation. They leave it out.
Right.
So your kids don't even know that this exists.
Okay, they were giving us the sign that we got to clear the room. So anyway, finally, just let me tell you this. Freedom is in your hands, and it's in the hands of your sheriff. Get him going. Get a relationship with him. Put liberty first. Have him put liberty first. His oath and his duty to America, government, God, and freedom. Thank you so much.